On today's show, I'm going to be talking with Michael Leo Centi, and he is something of an auteur. He is a writer, director, producer, actor, and after today, I think you're going to learn he's also a documentarian. So, first of all, welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to blow your horn and read a little bit of your resume.
Okay.
And it's a lot of stuff. You've done features, shorts. Your shorts have appeared on compilations, but just to give people a little glimpse of that and to get them up to speed, I think as far back as 2011, you did your first feature, The Murderous Rampage of Malachi Stitch.
Yes. Yeah.
Boy, you've got some tongue twister titles. I like that. You followed that up with Stillborn, The Murderous Revenge of Lizzie. From there, All Hallows Eve Horror, My Deadly Playmate, the very recent Easter Holocaust. You've done shorts such as Time Killer from Dimension X, The Lost Campfire Tales, Undead Manor, Renegade Nuns in Outer Space. There you go with your titles again.
Yeah.
I Gotta, Werewolf Hookers Attack, Psycho Cave Women, Werewolf Hookers 2, She-Wolves on Strike.
Of course.
And,
of course.
and the upcoming Bloodthirsty Trolls, Only Serve Satan.
Only Satan, yeah. No other
Because heaven
deities.
forbid they should serve someone else.
Right.
I think some of these shorts have showed up on compilations, such as, I think these are some of the Tony Newton produced compilations. Trashploitation, Grindsploitation 4, Meltsploitation, Clownsploitation, Grindsploitation 6, Schlockorama, and one called Theater of the Deranged 3. I think you have your own compilation, Videos from Hell, which looks like a compilation of your early shorts.
Yep, all the shorts.
And finally, the just released brand new documentary, Dollmaker, the Anatoly Moskvin Story.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking for a while. So what I want to know first of all is, how come you have these amazing long titles?
I don't know. I guess when I was a kid and I was writing in school, I would have like really simple titles for my stories. And my teacher told me, oh, those are too simple. You need to have more creative titles. So it was just something that always stuck with me in my mind. And I've just always been afraid of the title being too simple. And I always want to have a title that kind of captures the essence of whatever the story is that I'm telling. So I tend to be long-winded in all my writing, for sure.
Now you're from Buffalo, New York, or Jamestown, and you live in Buffalo now?
Correct. I'm originally from Jamestown, New York, the famous little city of Lucille Ball and Nellie Merchant of the 10,000 Maniacs. But I've been up in the Buffalo area for about 7 years now.
Okay, I went to Buffalo once. It wasn't as bad as people say.
No, not at all. It has its nice areas and bad areas, just like anywhere, for sure. But it's
what's kind of funny. One of my memories of it was this cemetery, and I know in your new documentary you kind of get into the whole cemetery thing.
Sure, sure. I love cemeteries in all my different projects, for sure. I love the Gothic architecture.
Yeah. Well, do you consider yourself a regional filmmaker? Like, are you representative of a Buffalo aesthetic?
Oh gosh, I would love to think of myself that way, but I do know there's so many other independent filmmakers out there working too. So I definitely can't take all the credit for that. But I like to think that I represent, the Buffalo, Jamestown area to some extent.
So when I think of Jamestown, I keep thinking of Jonestown. So I just imagine you as being part of some suicide cult.
Right, right. Yeah, hopefully, yeah, I don't know, never. But it would definitely, something, a theme I could see ending up in one of my films for sure.
Well, you kind of have this entourage of actors that you work with all the time, which sounds like your own little cult. I mean, what is it that attracts them to you?
Well, I like to say lovingly that I collect people throughout the years. When I was in high school, college, and just after college, I worked in a lot of stage productions. So I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of my actor friends that way. And so they've just kind of showed up in my productions, and we have a really great working relationship. Everybody kind of brings something new to the table, their own talents. And, being from a theater background, we all kind of collaborate. And, you might be acting in a scene, but some of the folks they do the makeup, they do the costuming. Yeah, it's like as you said, it is kind of like a cult in a way. Everybody brings something and a little bit more.
Well, you got the eyebrows for a cult leader.
Thank you. The window is just the eyes are the window to the soul, correct? So eyes are very important.
Well, to be a cult leader, hopefully it's a deep, dark, empty soul.
Yes, of course.
Well, one thing I really want to get into today is you're kind of representative of the entrepreneurial filmmakers who are really embracing Amazon and getting your movies up there in a big way, along with Hollywood. And you're
Mm,
also someone who wears a lot of hats. You're kind of the one man force that gets all these made. You're
sure.
not waiting around for investors and
Yep.
people to give you permission. So I want
No.
to get into that a little bit later, but
Okay.
first, I, I I'm just really curious. Like, when I first started making films, way longer before you did, we would make fun stuff on our video cameras,
Right.
and we never thought anyone would see them. And like you're doing your early stuff, and it's on Amazon Prime,
Mm-hmm.
especially like your compilation video.
Uh-huh.
Where you have like a lot of your early shorts.
Yep.
What's that like to show all your early stuff that maybe you didn't think anyone except for the people, your friends would see it?
Definitely exciting. A little intimidating because, like you said, I mean, I have films on Amazon Prime that are right up against Hollywood productions, so it's a little intimidating sometimes, but it is exciting and it is nice and satisfying to see the work finally out there. And it's really surprising too how many people actually will message me and share what their thoughts were about the productions, and mostly very positive, which is great, very encouraging. You know,
Because a lot of times people, they do student work or, they do their early stuff and think, okay, I've learned from it.
sure,
But they never show it. But I think the value of showing that is people can see more of your evolution. And it seems
yes,
like all your early themes, it's still what interests you. You can tell right off the bat, you like playing multiple characters.
yes.
You like doing drag.
Yep, we have a drag edge in there, definitely.
I was a drag edge. You like having your actors wear a lot of wigs.
Yep. There's it's like the whole theater background kind of thrown in there, the very campy 80s over the top with a little dash of daytime drama in there.
A little bit
Great.
of soap opera.
Yep. Big
And
fan
that's
of David
fun. And I think
Rogers.
like the limiting part of Amazon is you have to put everything into a category. So the default is horror,
Yeah.
but I see your stuff as way more, comedy. You've got a lot of camp humor.
Yes, for
It
sure.
seems like people going into it, expecting Wrong Turn 5 or,
Definitely.
Halloween, they're going to
Yeah.
actually, be kind of surprised because your stuff is more like, it's more like the scary movie version
Right.
of those movies.
Yeah.
So do you ever kind of have trouble with that perception of your work?
I do sometimes. I think I've had some reviews where people kind of didn't seem to get where I was coming from with the films. As you were saying, like I think sometimes people are expecting it to be like Halloween or Scream, and for me, I love those films. I'm a huge fan of 80s horror, obviously, but for me, I guess I always gravitate more towards the comedy aspect of it. I just have always found the humor in everyday life. So for me, no matter how hard I've ever tried to make a serious horror film, I inevitably always end up with comedy in it because that's just so much a part of myself. And I figured I don't want to suppress that. I just want to embrace that because with it being independent horror, I don't have to worry about a studio telling me, well, you can only have X amount of jokes in this, you can only have this or that. So I just totally go for whatever the vision is, and most times there's definitely humor in there, for sure.
Well, since you're so into that humor, why is horror a vehicle for that? Or, sci-fi, like the traditional kind of, exploitation, why is that a vehicle for your humor as opposed to, like a National Lampoon comedy?
Right. I think with horror, you can still explore a lot of different themes. You're not limited. Um, I don't know. I've always loved horror as far back as I can remember. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, horror was just always what I found myself drawn to.
Mhm. Well, being a one-man show too, I'm just always curious, would you ever like be in other people's things, or do you always want to like write and direct and just be the dominant force in everything you do?
Um, I definitely would like to branch out and work on other productions for other folks more. I've done a couple of smaller roles in independent films for other people.
Hmm.
Um, Really like the writing and directing and wearing so many hats kind of just came about as necessity. When I was first starting
Hmm.
out, and I had a limited budget and limited amount of folks that were involved. So I guess it's just what I'm used to. But I wouldn't be opposed to, relinquishing some of the control, but it just seems like that's kind of where it ends up every time with every production, is I end up kind of jumping into every aspect of things. But I definitely love to give the actors and the crew as much creative control as possible, and I'm always welcoming of ideas. I'll never. I mean, I might say no to an idea, but I always tell anyone that's in a production, if you have an idea that's not in the script, tell me. 9 times out of 10, I might actually use it. I don't ever want to be somebody that's not approachable or have an ego and say, I know everything and this script is the be all end all. For me, a script is just a rough map of where we're going. I don't mind taking a detour here and there and adding something a little more to it.
Do you allow your actors to improv?
Yes, I love improvisation, which I guess that goes back to my theater roots as well. Some of the best scenes and best lines have been things that were improvised. And when
Mhm.
I'm selecting somebody for a role, I generally envision a certain person for it. So I know that they're going to embody and bring certain aspects of the character to life. I trust that in the person. So for me, the improvisation is just a natural um, development of the character, for
Mhm.
sure.
Well, I've watched some of your work,
Oh
and it
boy.
was only like this morning I realized actually some of your shorts you can watch on your Facebook page, which, by the way, your production company is called Glamboy Productions.
Yes,
With a name like Glamboy Productions, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into.
sure. I would hope so.
Fun. I mean, there's a sense of fun to your work.
Right.
In that even though you have blood and gore, you've got great wigs and
Thank
kind of
you.
witty, campy dialogue. So you just know it's going to be fun.
Yeah. That's
But
my biggest goal is just to have fun with the projects and have people enjoy them and not take it too seriously. Definitely appreciate, the hard work and effort that we put into them, but I feel like life is so serious all the time, every day, especially now. So if
mhm.
there's a moment where we can laugh about something, I'm all for it.
So I think one of the first ones I saw was actually the more recent Easter Holocaust,
Oh gosh, thank you for watching that. Appreciate that.
which it was kind of cool. Then I saw some earlier stuff, and the first thing that struck me was that seemed to be the one where you jumped quality wise, where it's like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness, this looks really good.
Yes.
Did you like get a new camera right before that?
Yeah, invested in a new camera, a lot of new equipment, and just really took everything that we knew worked in the other productions and tried to carry that over into this latest one.
So, what camera did you switch to?
I have a Sony camera. It's a high def camera. Not the most expensive camera, but not the lowest end camera. Something kind of in the middle, because something that I really believe is you can have the most expensive equipment in the world, but if you don't know how to work with it or you don't have a creative vision, then it doesn't really help you.
Hmm.
It's something.
And have you like upped your lighting? Because I noticed Easter
Yeah.
Holocaust had a lot, more specialized lighting in it.
Yes. I've definitely dabbled more into different lighting for mood and just an overall interesting look to the productions visually. And the thing
Hmm.
with East Holocaust was that I really wanted to put a lot of pastel colors in there. Kind of my thought was an Easter basket. The old Easter baskets had all those different colors in them. And I just kind of wanted to throw that in there visually, like, somebody ate an Easter basket full of candy and threw it up everywhere. That was kind of my feeling.
Throwing up is a good analogy.
Yeah.
So, the other one I saw that was earlier that I kind of want to contrast it with was Stillborn, The Murderous Revenge of Lizzie, which was
Hmm.
that kind of a loose sequel to the murderous rampage of Malachi Stitch.
It was a very experimental film. I was working a lot, with green screen and just trying a lot of different effects out. And I just kind of wanted to do something that was just over the top and, everything plus the kitchen sink. Just threw as many things in there as possible.
And you did get everything but the kitchen sink. I agree. And it's kind of funny because now when you've kind of leaped to Easter Holocaust, which looks more like a conventional, horror film, and Stillborn, which is almost like an art film because
Yeah.
the narrative is so, it's rapid fire and you just jump from scene to scene. But when you say green screen, oh my God, I mean, you have layer upon layer because I think in some scenes you play two or even three characters where, and I don't know
Yeah.
how you do it, that you record them separately on green screen and then layer them. I
Layer
mean,
after.
I think a lot of people who watch that, they don't realize just technically what you had to do to, sandwich those characters together. How did you do that?
Just hours and hours of editing. Yeah. Just a lot
And
of
how did you
time.
like even plan that out? Because it seems so off the cuff, but to do that, just to place on the camera so people aren't blocking each other and just,
Right.
I mean, how long did that take to make?
Gosh, that film took probably about a year and a half to make from start to finish. But with all my productions, whether they're the feature length films or the short films, I storyboard everything shot for shot. I hand draw everything.
Mhm.
They're very cartoonish. I understand what they mean. They're not the best drawings, but every shot is drawn out. So I know exactly where I'm at whenever I'm filming. And it still leaves me room for, if we're on set and we have an idea for a different shot or something to add in, I can still add something in. And when I'm sitting down to edit, it's like a puzzle. I can just put it together, select each take from each shot that I wanted, and just assemble things and still be very creative, but always know where I'm at within the scene. It
Well,
saves a lot of time.
you do some tricky things in Stillborn where I could tell, like, you had two characters, you're, I think, by the river.
Mm,
Then a third character comes who obviously was not on location.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
sounds like
right.
was that like by design, or did that just save you because that actor couldn't be there on the set that day?
A little bit of both. Sometimes there were scheduling issues, and then sometimes it was just a matter of how I planned out the scene. But I
Mhm.
definitely was still trying to work on and perfect the green screen in that movie for sure. So there's a lot of mistakes in that one, but at the time, I used the skills that I had and what I knew, and I've been able to apply them towards, further productions. And like I said earlier, I always want to show growth. And I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of any of the earlier films, even though that they are a lesser quality in some ways. I'm still proud of them because without working on those films, I wouldn't know what I know now, and I wouldn't be where I'm at now, I suppose, creatively.
Well, there's tradition of campy horror.
Hmm.
I think of like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, just that
One of my
title.
favorites. Yes, one of my favorites.
And
Mhm.
I'm trying to think, what are the ones you grew up on, and to you, like, what are the best of that kind of campy horror comedy?
Gosh, you named one of them right off the bat, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I love things like Gremlins, the classic things. I was a huge, and still am a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. And one of the first, I think it was the first horror film I ever saw was Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. I
Hmm.
loved the lighting. I loved the effects. And side note, I was fortunate enough to become friends with actress Tuesday Knight. She played Kristen in that film. And she also has the opening theme song in the movie. So she actually allowed me to use music in All Hallows Eve 4 for the end credits, which was really fantastic. And in the beginning of that film, we use an instrumental version of the Nightmare on Elm Street 4 opening music, which was like a fan dream come true for me to be able to have her involved in any aspect.
Hmm.
Um, and also, she is doing and has recorded a cameo for the film I'm going to begin shooting next month, which is
Cool.
great. She's a great person.
So did you meet her like at a fan convention?
Actually, just through Facebook over the years, just chatting back and forth and getting to know her.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you
yeah,
do the conventions? Do you like have a table and have all your DVDs spread out for
I,
sale?
I don't. I have been to a few conventions. I have shown some of my films, but I haven't ventured into that too far. I'm usually just really busy working on the next project.
Do you think you've built up the Michael Leo Centi brand enough that you could be like a featured guy at a horror convention?
Maybe. I mean, it's always so hard to know. I see the numbers, and there's a good amount of numbers of streaming from Amazon Prime and Vimeo, and then some of the Roku streaming channels that have picked up the films. But it's always really hard to know because you don't always get feedback from people. You'll see the numbers, but you don't know, how aware
Mhm.
they are of your work.
But isn't that weird?
Mm,
It's such a big deal to make a movie, even a low budget movie, put it out there, and even on a big platform like Amazon, and then hear nothing. I mean, don't
yeah,
don't you think there'd be at least a couple people who would watch it, somehow track you down, get your email,
you
and
would
send you a fan letter?
you would think. I mean, I do get messages once in a while, but I don't know. It's a strange new frontier, I suppose. Definitely is.
Well, you'll be on the map when someone tracks you down and says, "Oh, I referenced your movie in my college thesis."
Right, right. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Definitely would.
We're like, "Oh, you're on the syllabus for my film studies class."
Right? That would be fantastic.
Okay, let me see what else here. Okay, my Deadly Playmate, Twisted Little Tale. I think that's the one where
Yes.
this kind of put upon little girl is visited by a clown, and then
Hmm.
some Chucky-like doll enters her life.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's a whole kind of cult aspect to that film and a little mommy dearest thrown in there for good measure, you know.
And that was kind of fun because I always liked the original Chucky movie, and there's just something innately creepy about dolls.
Yes. Yes.
So, were you like a Chucky fan?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've seen all the films, have all of them. Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to do something that was, Chucky-esque at some point. But in creating that film, I wanted to be sure that it was different. I didn't want it to be, a cookie cutter imitation of Chucky. I was sure to have a different approach with the doll. The doll well, inhabited by the spirit of a boy that was murdered. So the twist at the end of the film, without giving away too much, is kind of the murders are more of a protective measure than a revenge
Mhm.
aspect.
Right. Well, the doll thing seems to coincide with not just the title of your documentary Dollmaker, which
Yeah.
turns out those weren't dolls, but I actually did watch that this morning. Dollmaker, the Anatoly Moskvin story, which was based upon a true life, not serial killer. At
Nope.
first, I thought this was going to be about some serial killer, but about this guy in Russia who dug up these graves
Yeah.
and took the bodies of these girls home and kind of created like a doll like little, I don't know, personal little museum in his home.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard the story a few years ago, and it was just something that always stuck with me. And I originally thought of doing it as a film, an actual film, but then I got thinking about it more and more, and I thought, why not a documentary? It's something I have not hadn't done yet, and I had always thought about doing, and I've always been interested in true crime, and I grew up with the original Unsolved Mysteries, and so I wanted to do something kind of in the spirit of that. And with COVID, I had a lot of downtime, and the film that we're going to start working on has been on hold. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to actually sit down and do the research for um, Anatoly Moskvin and really delve into the history as much as I could. And I found I really wanted to do it as a documentary piece, and it was something I was able to um, work on solely myself without a cast or crew. So yeah.
Well, what struck me about it is the tone was very serious. So
Yes.
unlike your other movies,
Yeah.
it wasn't poking fun at it. It wasn't,
Oh,
funny one-liners.
oh,
And, you weren't dressed up as, Russian women in wigs and
just
but I
myself.
think that but it still had, a part of you in it because you did introduce it and then at the end you kind of wrap it up. So it has your stamp on it. But do
Mhm.
you think this is part of your evolution showing, a more serious side of you?
I think so. I definitely would like to do more documentaries in the future. Maybe something, maybe on hauntings. I've always been, fascinated with the paranormal, obviously.
Hmm.
And I probably would venture into doing more true crime things as well. And I really would love to challenge myself and attempt to do, a very serious, maybe Scream-esque type horror film in the future. Um, yeah, I guess it just really depends where my creativity takes me. I'm always kind of evolving and growing, but as you said, with putting a stamp on that documentary, that was myself. I think people will always know that it's my work, no matter what direction I go in with it.
Well, if you do more true crime and you end up doing a Jean Benet Ramsey documentary,
Gosh, yeah.
I do hope you play both Jean Benet and her mother,
Oh gosh, wow, that would be a trip, definitely.
preferably in scenes together with your green screen technique.
Yeah, that would be a new challenge. Yeah,
And you could actually play the brother too, maybe all three in one
good.
scene.
I could just play the whole family. Why not? Kind of a real quick, real dark, nutty professor type thing.
True crime is really big now.
Yeah,
Um, they already did Tiger King, but I could actually see you doing like a low rent Tiger King documentary.
right, right. I did follow that. I found that pretty interesting too. Yeah,
I don't know. It just seems like I don't know, should have he had been pardoned by Trump?
I thought that would have happened. I don't know.
Because could you imagine if he had been pardoned? He
Mhm.
would probably have his own TV show like within a week. I'm
Yeah.
sure, he'd just be like, Netflix's new whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Possibilities would be endless. You'd have so many phone calls to do projects.
I don't know, even though you're in Buffalo, it just seems like you'd be really good at almost that Southern Gothic kind of vibe.
Hmm.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
I just see you as, playing Southern rednecks and, having your, big sideburns and multicolored
Yeah.
orange hair. I mean, have you ever thought of just like doing an out and out Southern Gothic pot boiler? Because you can get really campy, and I think that would match your style really well.
I mean, we really kind of tried to channel some of that in Easter Holocaust with the redneck family, and I played a bounty hunter with a mullet and all that. But I would definitely love to venture more into that. I've always enjoyed that type of type of film. And with this next film that we're going to start working on, it's a zombie film. It's called Attack of the Radioactive Zombies. It's basically Willy Wonka meets Return of the Living Dead. And that film is going to be set in New Orleans, and it's going to have a very kind of swamp feeling to it, is what I kind of want to channel into that project.
So you're
So
doing it. You're
yeah,
doing exactly what I hoped you'd be doing.
yes, we're going to venture more into that kind of southern atmosphere. Yep,
So the
close to
Willy
the
Wonka part,
environment.
is there like a candy maker in it, or?
Not a candy maker. There will be a scene where there's candy in it with like, a little bit of a nod to Willy Wonka, but Return of the Living Dead was always one of my favorite films also. So I really wanted and always knew I wanted to do something full length with zombies. And this film's actually going to be based on the short film Undead Manor. It's going to be really a full version of that. And it's going to take
Which I
place.
did enjoy. I actually
Thank
watched that this morning again,
Yeah,
which had very much elements of Night of the Living Dead, the people barricaded in a house,
right.
and the threat at the door. And what I like about those style of movies is it usually throws together all these people who normally wouldn't associate with each other.
Right.
Because of this common threat, they all have to get along, but usually they blow up in each
Yep.
other's faces. And,
Right.
there's always some, inner turmoil that's, not letting them band together, and they have to like deal with their personal issues.
hmm Yeah, it definitely leads to a lot of fun and colorful dialogue, which is definitely in this script for sure.
But it seems like that's some of the funnest stuff to play. Like
hmm
in your Undead Manor, it seems like your actors had a lot of fun playing those scenes together.
Yes. Yeah, that's one big thing when we're making films is that we want to have fun. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. If we're not having fun, then there's no sense in even trying to do it. So I try to keep everything as fun and lighthearted as possible, but still have focus in what we're doing.
What's your directing style, especially when you work with your actors?
I try to keep things structured. I have an outline of how much time I feel that the scenes are going to take. I try to have everything as prepared as possible. But I really try to give them some creative control over their characters because I find that if they you know, have as much input as possible in their characters and they feel as free as possible, you're going to get the best performances. And as I said before, I select people for the roles really as I'm writing it. I have people in mind for it. So I really know what they're going to bring to the character. So I feel comfortable in letting them have that creative control. As long as we're hitting in the script and the story and the shots what really needs to be covered, I'm fine with people, bringing as much to it as they feel that they can.
Well, since you worked with some of these people over and over and you've got this rapport with them, do you ever say, "Hey, Lisa, I'm working on a new script"? Isn't that one of your actresses?
Yes. Yes.
Lisa, "Hey, Lisa, I'm working on a new script. What kind of character do you want to play this time?" Do you ever say, "Hey, do you have a dream character," and then incorporate that into the script?
Sometimes I do. A lot of times in production, in between filming, we talk a lot and they'll have ideas and I might not incorporate it into, the particular production we're working on that moment, but I file it away in the back of my head. And I don't always want to give people the same exact part every time. I try to
Mhm.
challenge everybody and give them something a little different so that, if you played a sheriff in one movie, you're not playing a sheriff in another, or you played a bimbo in one, you're not playing a bimbo in the other. Um,
So you
so
could be like an astronaut nun in one, and then
yeah,
she could be a werewolf hooker in the next.
exactly, exactly. We have to keep things varied up at least. But in working with everybody, I'm familiar with what their strengths are and what they need to work on, and I love seeing the growth in everybody. That's been always a fun part of it. To work with
You-
people that have never acted before, that's always a challenge. Versus working with
So do
people that
you take a
have
chance on newcomers? Do you like working
I
with
do.
people like that?
Yep, I do. I definitely do. A lot of times I'll start out with, a smaller to medium role just to kind of give them a feeling of what it's like because if someone's never acted before, let alone in front of a camera, it can be a little intimidating for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Well, it seems like
surprisingly,
you give the women really big parts,
yeah,
and the men kind of get more of the supporting parts.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. I don't think that was ever something I consciously have done, but it's kind of the way it's worked out.
Unless
Um,
it's you.
yeah,
So,
unless it's
unless you're playing the main guy. But
yeah.
it kind of seems like you're your own best star. Do you like always being the lead, or is that something you want to kind of share a little bit more?
I really want to kind of get away from that more and more. With the earlier productions, it was kind of out of necessity as we were still kind of building up our acting troupe. And with filming the films myself, it's very hard to play a large role and then hand the camera over to somebody else and still direct. It's a lot to do. So I would rather get into just playing more cameo parts in it. Just
Mhm.
show up with a wig on and deliver a few lines and then be gone than to try to carry a whole film. Not because I don't enjoy acting, I love acting, but it's really difficult to do everything plus act.
Mhm. Now, how long does it normally take you to make one of your feature length?
I would say from writing the script to actually, the film's done, complete, we're showing it, I would say probably a year and a half.
Wow, it's a long time.
Right. Yeah, I take usually probably about a month and a half to write the script, and then we take probably, I don't know, probably 6 months to film, and then however many months with editing and the music and sound design.
So
Um,
one thing people don't realize about like an indie film, obviously most people are working a 9 to 5 job. They're doing this on the side.
yeah,
And just to sustain a cast for a year and a half, working weekends and all that, but just
yep,
to like keep them in the loop and keep them interested. I mean, how do
yep.
you keep everyone in the loop for such a long time?
Constantly checking in with everybody through Facebook, through texting. But that's one thing is that everyone that I work with, we're all friends too, and we know that we can depend on each other, and no one's ever just bailed on a production, which, knock on wood, I'm very thankful for. We never had anybody just say, I'm not doing this anymore. So that's been a huge blessing. And that's something too is I don't ever really hold auditions necessarily. I tend, as I said earlier, collect people. So some of the actors I work with, they might say, "Oh, I worked with so and so in a play or a musical. I think they might be great for this." And then I'll reach out to that person and get to know them and see what their interest is and see what their work is like. And so yeah, we all just kind of continually collaborate and add new people into the troupe. Some people have kind of stepped away because their lives have gone in different directions, but I always try if people want to be involved in a production, I try to get them in there somehow, whether it's a quick cameo or a death scene or something.
Mhm.
Um, but definitely, it's
Well,
challenging.
actors too, when they say they want to move on to more, so-called mainstream work,
Hmm.
someone who does this type of work, they have to have that sense of humor and be proud of what it is.
Yes.
You ever come across an actor who like, oh, I want to move on to bigger production stuff, and oh, I want to play this. You know, sometimes actors when they've been in a very low budget horror like this, it's
Mhm.
they kind of act like they were like low budget porn, and oh, I don't
Right.
want anyone to know I did this kind of thing. It
Right.
seems like your people, are proud of this, and even if they
Yeah.
move on, they will
Mhm.
always proudly say, I was in a Michael Leo Centi movie. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Everyone, is fully committed and they enjoy what we're doing. And I've never been afraid of somebody moving on to a mainstream production and then never coming back. For me, if they do make it that far, that's fantastic. I would like to think that, they've learned some things from our productions and, you know, I root for them. That's fine. One of the actors that I've worked with for a number of years, he actually did some extra work on a program. I forget what the title is now. And he had to step away and we had to rework our schedule a little bit for filming. And I think he was afraid at first that, I'd be upset or something. I was like, no, by all means, if that came about, then go for it. Get yourself out there. Because my thought too is, help our productions as well. It's It's a
Mhm.
win-win for sure.
Well, what's the best thing an actor's ever told you about working for you and being on your production?
I would say, commonly that they've had a lot of fun. That's been the main thing, and that makes me feel very happy to know that it's never something that feels like a chore. Because
Mhm.
there are times where we can film for 8, 9 hours, and we get a little tired towards the end, and sometimes, people get a little grumpy, but at the end of the day, like when we're done, like we know we've had fun and
Mhm.
we're ready to come back and do it again. And it's not
Like,
always
how long are
glamorous.
your shooting days? Like, how many hours would you shoot for on average?
I would say I go for like an 8 hour shoot. I usually film 2 scenes at a time. So I plan everything accordingly with, everybody to make sure they're available. And that's another thing that's a challenge is taking into consideration everybody's schedules. If somebody has to work that day, we might have to film out of sequence, to make sure that we get their shots for the scene, which we do that a lot actually. And that's where the planning really comes into effect with the storyboarding, knowing what shots we're going to
Mhm.
do, and being able to jump around in the scenes and say, okay, we have to film the middle of the scene because so and so is available for these 2 hours, and then they have to leave to go to work or a family gathering or something. So you always have to know where you're at within the scene, and continuity is a big thing. Being aware of that, okay, did you have this jacket on in the beginning of the scene versus the end of the scene? And yeah, there's a lot of things
You have a
constantly.
thrift supervisor, don't you?
I do,
You
and she's
do.
great. Yeah,
I'm
yeah, she's
impressed.
yeah,
Does
she's
she
one of
take
the actresses.
Polaroids of each scene so when you come back, they'll know, oh, the hat was tilted this
Yeah.
way when.
Yeah, she takes a lot of pictures, which is great. We, to refer to. And she has a great memory. She'll say, "Oh, so and so had this on this way. We have to be aware of continuity." I'm like, I know, but
So, like, how big is your crew? Like, do you operate your own camera?
I do. I film everything. Um, if I'm in a scene, then I bounce back and forth, and I have a couple of the actors that are well versed with working with the camera, and so
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Everyone
So
works
you're
together.
a cameraman, you got a script supervisor. Do you have someone do lights or cinematography?
Nope. I pretty much know where the lights are going to go, and I have a few people help me set them up and change them around, and you know, load
And
everything
you
up.
do art direction, wardrobe. I mean,
I
do
do
you like
that.
dictate the whole look of everything?
I do. Yeah, I plan out the props. I plan out what the wardrobe's going to be, the wigs if we need them. Which yeah, we usually need wigs. Got to have the wigs. So yeah, really the whole visual of. I look at it as a whole picture. The
Hmm.
makeup, the wigs, the props. Um, I really do as much of that as possible because there's a certain look I have in my mind for the script.
Hmm.
It,
Well, like I was telling you earlier, this is my first filmed podcast.
uh-huh.
And it's kind of funny is when you do it, you realize, oh my God, people are going to see what's behind me. You
Right?
kind of look and go, oh my God, what crap do I have in the background?
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, do I take everything down or do I just cover it up? I thought, oh,
Right.
covering it up would be a lot easier. So for you, I put a picture to cover that crap. And over there, I found some just pink leopard print I had just sitting around. So there you go. All for you. What do you
There you
think? Is it
so
pleasing to the eye?
yes, it's definitely in the spirit of my productions. Yep. And a lot of times I'll look around the house and say, "Oh, okay, what can I need this type of furniture or I need this type of vase." I'm famous for things disappearing at home. My partner will say, "Oh, where did this picture go? Where did this vase go?" "Oh, you're filming."
But you kind of have to do that. And do you ever like just rummage thrift stores to find props
Yes.
and costumes?
Yes, that's my one of my favorite things to do is go to thrift stores. You can find the most unique things that way for very little. Where people give me things, it's all just what we can find and put together.
Well, I was curious when you just said people give you things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
flashing back to the 90s when I used to do some productions. And I just remember one day looking in my apartment And people would leave all this crap. Like when you shoot, they would bring stuff. But sometimes they'd bring like alternate, oh, I brought a couple outfits, tell me, what looks good.
Hmm.
And for some reason, they would always leave stuff behind. I remember
Yeah,
one day seeing this pile of coats and shoes, and not just that, but hairspray and
yeah,
curling irons. And I remember at one point, I just had like 4 curling irons in my apartment that
right,
people had just left. And I thought, how could there be 4 of them? And
right.
then I remember at one point then when people would come to my apartment, I said, look at that pile there. If you take whatever you want, take something. I'd
Yeah,
make people take curling irons when they left.
yeah.
Do you just accumulate crap? Do you just have a big
I
pile
do.
of junk
I,
that people leave?
I do. I have so much stuff that I've gotten myself, and like as you said, with productions, it seems like people are always giving me stuff. Oh, here's a skirt. I bought it for this production. I don't need it. You can use it. Here's a wig. So I have like, bins of different clothes for different things, and a bin full of wigs and stuff of makeup, and yeah, I have a whole area in my finished basement of just everything.
Do you ever
So
get like a prop or something? You think this is so cool? I have to write this into a scene.
yes, I definitely do.
So
Yes, and I like
what did you write into a scene?
to get into a scene. Um, Trying to
Like,
think.
did someone give you a bunny head and you said, "Oh, I've got to make a killer rabbit movie"?
I can't think of anything offhand, but I do love to put props in films that I've used in other ones, like little Easter eggs of things. I do that a lot to see if people notice.
Was there an Easter egg in Easter Holocaust?
There were actually several. The doll from My Deadly Playmates on a dresser in one scene. I have my movie poster from The Murderous Rampage of Malachi Stitch on a wall. So things like that. There's literally little Easter eggs in there. Yeah.
Well, do you think you've got a big enough body of work now that you can be self-referential?
Yeah, I think so a little bit. I like to draw like a lot of connections to my other films, whether, story elements or, characters that are connected. I like to treat it all as one universe.
Well, if you count your shorts, at this point, you've made more films than Quentin Tarantino.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I never would have thought that. That's amazing. Yeah, I like as I said before, like I'm always focused on the next project. I just keep pushing forward. So I don't really take a lot of times to stop and think about, the last productions. I'm not somebody that I don't sit down and rewatch my work. I hate to watch myself. I love to watch everyone else in the film, but I don't like to watch myself. So,
So, what are the more recent movies that have inspired you, or people that you think are on the same wavelength as you?
oh gosh. I love American Horror Story.
Hmm.
I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from that. I would say I mean, it's not a film, but that's probably something that I have gone back to a lot over the years because I think that
Which
there's,
season do you like the most?
which season? I would say I like,
Hotel?
what's that?
Hotel?
Hotel. I liked Coven a lot
Okay.
because of the New Orleans feel, because it's in New Orleans. I enjoyed that a lot.
So you do have this Southern thing at heart.
I do, and I went to New Orleans a couple years ago, and I loved it. So I've known I've wanted to do more with that, and I was sure to go and get footage of different locations that were used in American Horror Story for sure. So some of
Hmm.
that might end up in this.
Did you like the last one, 1984?
I did. It was so different than the other seasons, and it took place in the '80s, which is perfect. I love the '80s, favorite genre of horror. So yeah, perfect. I loved it.
What do you think of this whole, eternal love of 80s slasher movies, which, there's no end in sight. People just still loving it,
Yeah.
paying homage to it in so many new movies. I mean, is that one of your kind of special things you look back on and say, yeah, I just love 80s slashers?
Yes, definitely. I'm a child of the '80s, so it's what I grew
I
up
mean,
with.
I'm assuming you're young, but like at what age did you like see your first slasher? You probably saw a lot of these 80s slashers, not when they first came out, but well after the fact. I mean, how
Right.
old are you?
I'm 39, so I saw.
How long have you been 39 for?
I just turned 39 on the 14th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That was a joke. It's like, how many years have you been 39 for?
I know. Right? I'm just well preserved, I suppose. The evil.
Well, that's another thing that's hard to explain to people. When you're in your teens and 20s, oh, you're doing this silly little horror thing,
Yeah,
making your little backyard horror movies. People kind of tolerate that, in your 20s. In
sure.
your 30s, there gets to be this turning point where people are like, well, you're almost 40. When are you going to,
I
make
know.
a real movie? You know what
I
I
know.
mean? That bias. Do you ever
I
get
know.
that from people?
When I did the first film, the Malachi Stitch film, a lot of people kind of didn't understand what I was doing. They were thinking, "Why are you doing this?" I don't think that they saw that it would really go anywhere. But now, as more years have gone by, and I've continued with it, and the films are really out there, and I've been able to incorporate, some actors that are known in the industry. A lot of family and friends, I think, really have taken a step back, and they definitely see the value in it now. That it's not just a passing phase, so to speak.
But see, if you're doing low budget dramas, there wouldn't be that judgment. It's the
I know.
fact that it's more
I know.
outrageous horror and
Yeah.
comedy that it
Right.
gets discounted. Yet,
Yeah.
if you do that same content on Netflix with a budget, because it has that stamp of approval, they accept
Yeah.
it.
Oh
This
yeah.
is one of the hardest low budget genres to justify to your
Yes.
mainstream family and friends.
Yes. Yeah. And I s- I see a lot of movies that are mainstream that are horror movies, and there's not much content to it. Visually, they look great, but the story is just so one dimensional, and the acting is just okay. But yeah, so many people watch these films because it's something that Hollywood put out, and yet they're skeptical to watch an independent film that is outside of the box. So it is frustrating sometimes, and people don't realize how much work goes into a horror film. There's so many aspects that you have to just kind of pull out of thin air to make work.
Are
Um,
you are you a fan of John Waters?
I love John Waters. Yes, definitely.
Because that's one where if people don't get him, they probably won't get your work. But if they like
Yes.
him, that's like a good starting point to
Yeah.
understand that style of acting or
Right.
incorporating drag. And
Right.
I think that for a lot of people, they just don't get that it's meant to be funny.
They don't, and it surprises me. Like I think, how do you not know that this is supposed to be funny? I have a woman that gets impaled with a dildo through the back of her head in Easter Holocaust. That's funny. Like it's supposed to be funny. Laugh at it. Like I don't mean it to be serious. I get melted in that movie. It's supposed to be funny. Like I never set out to make a serious, Hitchcock movie. I'm trying to make, like a Killer Clowns from Outer Space movie. So yeah, I think that's where the titles also I try to give people a little bit of a hint that yeah, this is tongue in cheek. This is supposed to be funny. So I do get frustrated sometimes when I've seen some reviews where you can tell they didn't get that it was supposed to be funny, that they were expecting it to be some really serious horror movie and they were disappointed, and yeah, it's
Well,
frustrating.
your violence is more cartoonish. It's very
Right.
obvious. It's
Yeah,
not
I think
sadistic
so.
violence. It's not,
Yeah.
meant to traumatize people.
Mm-mm. No, and I do like to try to mix in some uncomfortable subject matter, a lot of psychological things, but I like to push things to a certain point and then kind of give a comedic break. I think
Hmm.
that's psychologically, and that's something I remember Robert England, or it wasn't Robert England, it was the late Wes Craven was saying about his work in the Nightmare on Elm Street films is that there is humor in them, and you do that on purpose to set people up for the next scare. You give them that little mental break. That always stuck with me.
Are you a fan of the original Evil Dead?
I love the original Evil Dead, and I was very pleasantly surprised with Ash versus Evil Dead. Very
Because
much.
that reminds me of your work, like the Undead Manor, people
Yes.
trapped in a room together. But
Hmm.
it's so out there, there's a lot of humor too.
Yes. Yeah. That is one of my all-time favorite films. Yep. The
What are your other favorites? Whether it's horror or comedy, I mean, what other movies do you go back to that you know you're going to like every time you see it?
I would say Fright Night, the original Fright Night. I love that. That's a great
Hmm.
film. I love non-horror all-time favorite. Maybe it sounds generic, but The Wizard of Oz. I've always loved that. How colorful it is.
Hmm.
Um, and probably Nightmare on Elm Street, the very first one. I really love that. I still think that film holds up today.
Which is much more just frightening than the sequels, which
Yeah.
become a lot more one-liners and little
Mhm.
jokes from Freddy. The
Right.
first one, that was scary.
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember, like I said, I watched watched part four first, and then backtracked, and I was really kind of shocked when I saw the first one. I think I was like 12 or something. It really kind of scared me. So
Because I
yeah,
saw the first one in the theater when it came out,
wow,
and it's just so fun to have been able to see that in a theater. Because a lot of
yeah,
people discover these on home video first,
right,
but then to be in a theater where they're hiding behind their popcorn, the big
yeah,
scare happens, they scream, then they
hmm
start yelling at the screen, and they yell at Freddy as if he would hear them.
right,
And I think
right.
people miss out on that. Have you ever had a good experience in a theater where it was like interactive during a horror movie?
Yeah, I think this is going back some time. When I saw Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday in the movie theater, I know a lot of
Hmm.
people were jumping and saying, watch out. And it's unfortunate. I think, that kind of time period's really kind of come and gone. It's, the
Hmm.
days of going and seeing a movie like that, or going to the video store and renting a movie and pulling back the little styrofoam one in front of it and hoping it was there. I'm glad I kind of was able to be a part of that growing up.
Have you put out any of your movies on DVD or home video?
Yeah, there's a few that are actually on Amazon on demand. You can purchase them that
Mhm.
way. Whenever I do a film, I have a run of them produced myself, and I sell to whoever wants one at the premieres that we do. Unfortunately, with COVID, I wasn't able to do a big premiere for Easter Holocaust, so the copies were kind of limited and
Mhm.
who purchased those. But I'm really kind of leaning away from that more and really focusing on the streaming. That seems to be, where everything's going, and um,
Mhm.
working to get more things on the Roku streaming channels. They seem to be
Are
doing
there
well.
any home video stores in Buffalo?
No, unfortunately, we had Family Video. We had a few of those, and those have finally all folded up. They're closed.
Are there any
So
like independent holdouts, like a mom and pop rental store?
no, no, and unfortunately not. So yeah,
So, is there
everything's
any store anywhere in the world where you can rent one of your DVDs?
not that I know of. No,
Would that be
no.
a goal of yours? Just have one of your movies in a video store where someone could rent it?
That was my dream growing up. And when I first made the first couple of films, I used to jokingly say, my dream was to find one of my movies in the Walmart $5 bin.
There you go. That's
And
aiming high.
yeah, then I would know that I had made it.
You would actually. It's a real feat to get into that $5 bin.
Yes, yeah. I
I
have
mean,
um, I have looked into a few different distributors, and I haven't had really good luck with them. I've had some offers, but a lot of times what I'm finding with the low budget horror distributors is that they basically want to own your movie forever, and
mhm.
they want to give you very little profit, and they want creative control of it, which means they can change the title, they can re-edit it, they can chop it up and put it into other films.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, so that was kind of a deterrent from a couple of the different distributors that I have been in talks with for my last few films, that I kind
Mhm.
of said no, I'd rather retain the rights to my films, and whatever profit I get, and I can continue to submit my films to different streaming platforms, because if you go through a distributor, you can't do that. Like, they have your film. You say a new sort of Amazon Prime or Netflix comes up, your hands are tied. You can't pursue that.
Now you've got your own Vimeo page where people can actually rent and buy your movies.
Yes,
What's that been like? Do you get a lot of traffic there?
I do, surprisingly. And I'm real sure to be involved in different horror Facebook pages and give updates on, the films and what's coming down the pipeline. So I think that helps.
Hmm.
So
All right.
it's
Well, we're going to go into not quite our final heat, getting closer, but I just want to make sure that on all my notes I took, which I can't understand anymore, so I'm just going to read you the random phrases I wrote.
okay. We'll see if they make sense.
I can't remember what prompted them. Let's see. Acting style, I think we hit on that. Your writing process,
Mm,
layering characters, wigs, green screen,
yeah.
ensemble cast.
Yeah.
So I think we covered most of that, but basically, I really especially wanted to know your writing process because to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, you pick this crazy title and then say, okay, I have to write a script that matches, Stillborn, The Murderous Revenge of Lizzie. I mean, the script practically writes itself after that.
Right. Believe it or not, I usually write the script first and then come up with the title.
Ah,
Yeah, to do it the opposite. But a lot of times I have like a core idea in my mind for a story, and then I sit down and I start thinking about, what have I done, what haven't I done story-wise in other films, and what would I like to try to do. And I start writing down kind of the outline of the story where I want it to start, the middle, and the end. And then I work on the different elements that I want to incorporate into the script. And in that way, I challenge myself to get as much of the creative elements in there that I can and make it work. Um,
so in Stillborn,
mhm,
you used a technique where you start out on a talk show and your character has
bookended,
written a book and then it kind of
yeah.
flashes back to the events from the book, the
Mhm,
real life events, and then at the end I think it goes back to the talk show.
yeah.
So you use that as a framing device.
Yeah. I
Like
like
that
to do
was
things
kind of
like that.
interesting. Did you decide to do it that way from the start, or did you write the main movie and then decide to add the framing device at the end?
No, I set out to have it that way, to have like the bookends to it.
Hmm.
Another device that I I kind of tend to go back to, and I'm trying to force myself not to as much, are flashbacks. I love to do flashbacks, but I've been trying to challenge myself to get away from that a little bit more.
Hmm. Well, one production thing in Stillborn on the talk show, and this is again why I think people have to have a sense of humor because it borders on the absurd. It's like
Mm,
a TV talk show, you've got your, I wouldn't say Oprah, maybe more like a Sally Jesse Raphael kind of talk show.
yes.
And it's so obviously like in a school auditorium or a lunchroom or
Yeah.
something on
Yeah.
stage, and then the studio audience is so obviously in a school lunchroom or an auditorium
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But then what really got me was when the camera goes up and then, your handwritten sign for the talk
Right.
show. Oh my
It's
God.
crazy.
That was
Yeah.
low budget.
Yes. Yeah. We
But
went
did
for
you
it.
mean that kind of ironically?
I did. I wanted to just look as silly as possible. Yeah. Because that was the whole tone of the movie. Like I knew everything was going to be silly in it, so it's like just go for it. I wanted it to be obvious right from the beginning that this wasn't meant to be a serious film, and that's
But do you
kind of
think
the
in some ways, if you know you can't duplicate it perfectly, is it
Mm.
almost better just to go as lo-fi as possible?
Yeah, depending on what the film is. Like if I feel like I there's no way I can get close to a certain effect or certain look, I'll step back. Like I know that more now when to kind of pull back and
Hmm.
scale things down a little bit and find a different way to still get the same idea across. But if it's something that's really over the top and absurd, then I just go for it. I figure, that's part of the charm of a movie like Stillborn that's so low budget is that you can kind of get away with things, mistakes, anything. It's all in fun.
I mean, you have a baby that crawls back into its mother's womb.
Right. Right.
And what
I
I
mean,
love
after
about that
that,
is
like,
you write
awesome.
that, and
Yeah.
then you're on set and you think, oh my God, how am I gonna film this?
Right. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a
Do
challenge.
you ever write something and you have no idea how you're gonna pull it off?
Yeah, sometimes I do. And I just tell myself, I'll figure it out, make it work once we get into filming, and I just keep going. Because when I'm in the writing process, I'm just focused on the story. And I tell myself we'll make it work. I've always jokingly said on my tombstone someday, the phrase just make it work will be on there. Just make it work. That's like my big phrase all the time when we're working. Because
I thought it'd
we've
be
had
something more like you'd write on your tombstone, "Don't dig me up."
I don't know. If there's a way to resurrect me, maybe, and they could do it in a way that was
Or
stylish, sure. And a good
or
wig, if my hair's gone, give me a good wig.
or what did the guy do in the Dollmaker documentary? He thought that if he slept on the grave, he could kind of communicate with the dead
Yeah,
person.
yeah, that they would be kind of like speaking to him to ask him to take them home with him. Yeah,
So maybe you could like on your grave, you could like have a little pillow and an alarm clock or something.
right. I like that. Maybe that'll have to end up in a script at some point. I like the visual of that.
Well, what I'd like to wrap up with here, and this is what I don't hear enough. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about filmmaking on YouTube and some
Hmm.
great advice, but now that anyone can make a movie that looks halfway decent and put it on Amazon and kind of approximate being a Hollywood filmmaker,
Hmm.
I just want to hear more of the practical side and for you to, give some advice about it. Because I think a lot of people, you see a lot of one-offs where they think, "Oh, I can do this and I've got a cool camera and I've got some friends, let's get together." And they end
Yeah,
up making like one movie and that's it. And I
it's
think a
not.
lot of times because they're so frustrated and they
Yeah.
realize it's so much more work than they
Yes.
realize.
Yeah.
So for someone who goes, "I'm going to get my stimulus check and buy a camera and get on Amazon," what's
Hmm.
the hardest part of filmmaking?
Gosh, the hardest part. Every aspect has its own challenges. Um, I would just say sticking with it from start to finish. It is a lengthy process. There's going to be so many challenges along the way that as much as you plan, you can't even foresee. Things that break when you're filming, and then you have to figure out how to work around it. Um, yeah, it's definitely not as easy as what people think. It's not just a matter of getting, a bunch of friends together on a weekend and turning on your camera and recording. You have to really plan everything out. You have to be aware of your time. You have to be aware of um, how to work with your camera, how to get certain angles and to get the best visual possible. And
Mhm.
as I said earlier, it's not about having the best camera. You can have the best camera and still have a very dull, boring, lifeless film. I've seen people, create short films, feature-length films with um, very basic cameras that are great films. So it's not all about the equipment you have; it's how you use it. I would almost
How
recommend,
about the people who, "Oh, yeah, I want to make my movie, but I have to have this drone shot. I can't
no,
do it without the drone." And they're just so caught up in they have to have, the
they're missing
new
the point.
technical thing.
Yeah, they're missing the point of what the whole process is about. If you don't have access to a drone, how can you? It's like how could you create a similar feeling in the film and still get the message across? There's always a way that you can get the vision completed.
But don't you secretly dream of a drone shot?
I do. I do. I've thought about that before, maybe working one in somehow, but I just
What
haven't
does it
made
take? Well,
the
what does
opportunity.
it take for you to justify investing in new equipment?
How much I'm gonna use it, I suppose, just being aware of really how often I would use it.
Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
know, like we were saying before, Easter Holocaust, you made a jump up to new equipment. How
Yeah.
long did you anticipate, or was it just that, oh, this new camera came out, the prices have dropped? What motivated that?
Just the more I got into the streaming aspect of things and really looking at other films that were coming out, I just knew I wanted a little more of a professional look to the films. I wanted to make sure that that wasn't something that would continually hold the films back, was the lesser quality camera.
Mhm.
So, and then
Well, do you
knowing,
think in the past people have discounted your content because of the format you shot on?
I think sometimes there is a little bit of that to it. You know, people will think, oh, it's not a Hollywood film, therefore it can't possibly be good. And I really don't think that's true. I really don't.
I kind of secretly like it when someone goes into a movie expecting Hollywood, then they see
Yeah,
this low budget DSLR, and it
yeah.
just, for some people, it just really disturbs them. They
They
can't
can't
get
handle
past that. They act like they've been had somehow. Like, how dare you even make
it. Right,
this?
right. But it's like look at all the older films that people still say are just works of art still. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, the camera they used back then is nothing compared to what we have now, but still
Mhm.
that's a fantastic film. But I
Wasn't
mean
that
that
shot on 16 millimeter film?
right,
Yeah.
right. So even a low budget camera we have now is still better quality than that. So I
Right.
just think people need to get out of that mindset that, you know, the actual camera that's used for a film makes it or breaks it, because I don't believe that. And especially in independent film. That's the whole idea of independent film, is to just, for me, is to work with what you have and make something fantastic with it. And to think outside of the box, you know. If I wanted to do a Hollywood movie, I would try to go to Hollywood and make a Hollywood movie. I want to make something original and fun. So
But that's
that's
another good point. A lot of people who are an auteur like you know, wearing all the hats, you're the one force getting your movie made.
hmm
But you're also choosing not to go through all the Hollywood hoops. And
yep,
that's one thing people have to realize. There's pros and cons to both.
yeah,
Because you could go to Hollywood, start on the bottom rung, and try to work your way up as a production assistant or whatever.
right, right,
And that's okay.
yeah,
And I think we still have to appreciate the people who have done that. Because
for
that's a big
sure, definitely.
sacrifice to be at Hollywood's mercy
Oh,
and
for
take
sure,
years and years to work your way up.
yeah,
But the flip side is a beginning filmmaker can't get that same production value as a one man band.
right,
I mean,
right.
are you hyper aware of that, the limitations?
I am, yeah, for sure,
And
yeah.
do you ever get disillusioned and think, yeah, I know it's just, you know, me doing most of these things, but yeah, I would like to approach this quality. Do you ever think, okay, am I at the point where I'm ready to bring, you know, a director of photography on board or to have a separate person operating the camera? Or do you think, no, part of who I am is still wearing all those hats?
You know, in the beginning, and even maybe a few years ago, I used to think it'd be great to have somebody to wear the other hats. But now, as time goes by, I really have come to value and appreciate the eclectic appeal of the filmmaking process. You know, of everyone just coming together and bringing their energy and their talents. I think we just get something really unique that way, and I don't think we would have the same experience. And for me, it's as independent as I could think a production could be, and I've kind of more embraced it for sure.
So
And
you do you
yeah,
like the word auteur, meaning you have such a dominant influence on all the aspects of your films?
yeah, I definitely appreciate, you know, somebody knowing that it's my film right away just by the style.
Hmm.
Um, I don't ever want to be overly controlling in a production. That's not something I ever want to do. But I do have a certain vision in mind, and as long as I always think, as long as we get maybe 95% of what I had in mind, I'm pretty happy.
But that's also another thing that beginning filmmakers don't realize. They see the fun part, they see the camaraderie, yet in
hmm
spite of that, as much as you like your colleagues,
hmm
you still need to be a strong director.
Yeah, that's
And
a challenge.
but there can be fun on the set, but
Yeah,
it can be serious at the same time. That it's more fun for the individuals if they have a sense that you are directing strongly.
Right. It's a real balance because I want to keep things on schedule and keep people in the proper direction, but I don't want to seem like a tyrant and ruin the fun of it. So I'm always trying to have a balance between the two.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe you are more of a tyrant than you realize.
Maybe, maybe.
Do you ever get exhausted? That's the other thing is
Very
it's
much.
mentally and
Yeah.
physically exhausting to direct, doubly so when you're acting in it too.
Yeah, usually by the end of the night and into the next day, I'm pretty wiped out. Very much so. Yeah. That's
So
why
how do you deal with that? I mean, is that one reason why maybe do you when you're done with the project, do you feel so burnt out you take a few months off? Or the minute you're done, do you start prepping the next project?
I usually have in mind what I would like to work on next, but I usually do give myself a couple months off before I even begin to sit down and
Mhm.
write.
How about editing? Do you edit your work?
I do. I do. Taught
So when
myself.
you're done, do you wait till everything is shot and in the can, then you start editing? Do you edit along the way as you're shooting?
I edit everything along the way, scene by scene,
Mhm.
because I find it's still fresh in my mind creatively as far as what I want for the scene. And then I still have the opportunity when all the rough scenes are cut together at the very end to have a final pass at it and tweak things or change things that maybe story wise or visually didn't work. And then I'm not
Mhm.
overwhelmed at the end with, a whole bunch of footage to go through. I just find that it keeps things more on track and in order. And if there's anything else I need to get for other scenes, I know what I still need to shoot.
Well, where do you do your green screen work?
Gosh, anywhere. Sometimes at my house, sometimes on the actual location that we're at in an area. It really depends on what we're trying to shoot.
Because in your world, if you need to reshoot something, you may not have to go back to that location. You could
Right,
just shoot yourself on a green screen and then insert yourself into that scene,
right, right.
which it seems like you often do that.
Yeah, yeah, depending on what the scene calls for. Yeah.
Do you think that either editing software or whatever you've been using, are your green screen chroma keys getting a little more seamless now?
I think they are. And I think that, in general, what's available now that it's greatly improved from even 10 years ago, what we have to work with now. So I think with
Because
the
the early ones, it's almost its own little artistic statement.
yeah,
Your green screen has these pixelations around it, like a halo,
right,
which is kind
right.
of its own aesthetic.
Right. Right. I kind of worked it in with the stillborn film and gave it some like I don't know, maybe like a 70s grainy feel to it. I just kind of worked that into the style of it. But yeah, I definitely now the green screen is a lot more crisp. And I tend to use it more sparingly for effects or maybe a brief shot of two people playing or one person playing two characters. I don't try to do a whole scene like I used to. It's way too much.
In 20 years, people will purposely try to create rougher chroma key just to simulate
The qual yeah,
what your work looked like. Maybe there'll be a whole preset called the Sentai effect.
that would be wonderful. I'd love that. I love that.
Well, the other thing I was going to say too, just from the filmmaker's standpoint, is what's the lowest point you've been at where you said, this is just too much to do on my own? Have you ever just stopped and said, enough, I'm going to go back to school, I'm going to become a doctor, I want to make big bucks? I mean, what's that low point where when you've kind of thought, I just can't do this?
I would say probably in between All Hallows Eve horror and my Deadly Playmate, I kind of hit a patch where I was like, is this gonna, continue to go somewhere? Are there new outlets to get the films out? And yeah, I kind of hit a little bit of a patch there, and then I started to talk to other filmmakers, and they kind of pointed me in the right direction of streaming becoming a bigger thing, and that kind of renewed the spark for me a little bit, knowing that there were more avenues out there to get the work for the rest of the world to see.
Even though we're so connected and Zooming and YouTubing,
Hmm.
in spite of that, it seems like a lot of independent filmmakers still keep themselves isolated.
Yeah, I do think so. It does seem that way.
Do you think it's
I,
harder for you too because you're not just an indie filmmaker or not just a horror, but
mhm.
you are one with a campy, fun sensibility, and that even within like the horror world, there's such a it can be such a seriousness. Like I want to make the next The Witch, or I want to make the next whatever the new gripping horror movie is, or I just have this minimum production value that defines someone who's at your budget, at your aesthetic. Is it harder for you to find a colleague that you can talk to that really gets your work?
It definitely is. I do sometimes kind of feel like a little bit of an outsider in the independent horror world because what I do, it kind of is in its own genre. It's not, necessarily the over the top, really violent, gory horror that a lot of people seem to lean toward. Um, so it is. I would love to work with other filmmakers more, and I have worked with a few. But I do notice what it seems like with independent horror films, at least. There's a lot of competition and a lot of rivalry. Like a lot of filmmakers don't want to work with other people. They don't, they seem very guarded with their cast. And for me, I don't look at it that way. I think it's great to work with other people and exchange information and learn from each other. And I have been fortunate to work with another filmmaker out of Erie, Killer Wolf Films, Len. He he's a great filmmaker. His horror is more like action horror, where mine
Hmm.
is like campy comedy horror. So we're not really competing with each other, I suppose.
Hmm.
We still have a lot of things in common, I think, with the way we create films, the process. So yeah, there's been some exchange that way, and I've been able to incorporate some of his actors into my work and vice versa.
Do you have trusted colleagues where you would show them a rough edit of your projects and get their
Yeah,
feedback?
I definitely would. Yeah.
And do you enjoy getting feedback?
I do. I really do. I'm a big believer in constructive criticism as long as it's coming from a point of, being constructive. If it's just to
Mhm.
be mean or bitchy, then no. But if it's honest and constructive, then yeah. I mean, if it's something that could help me continue to grow and do better, then by all means, I welcome it. Just like ideas on the set.
Because a tough thing, because people said, oh, with the internet, we can share.
Mm,
But there's a big drawback to sharing randomly. It's like I think
yeah.
you have to try really hard to you have to curate your colleagues, first
Yes.
of all, so that they're in the same wavelength. I see people, they post a link on Reddit on a filmmakers group and say, hey, I want some feedback on this project. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh my God, they're just throwing them to the sharks.
Yeah. People can be so just cruel just to do it. I've seen that
Mhm.
kind of stuff, even on some of the different Facebook horror pages. And I think, what's the point? Just because you can say something doesn't mean you need to or should.
Right.
You know.
And I think for a first time filmmaker, especially before they built up their confidence, that could stop a lot of people their first film. They might just say, I just can't do this.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I've
what's
heard
your
the exact
advice
same
to people? How do you develop a thick skin without losing, some of your creative sensitivity?
I would just say it's really important to know yourself and to realize that, you know, even Hollywood films, they get a lot of negative reviews and people say awful things about films that are, billion-dollar, million-dollar movies. So you really can't take any of that to heart. And everybody has an
Mhm.
opinion. Um, and I've honestly seen movies that I know are great films have people say awful things about them. So I've just learned not
Mhm.
to really pay attention to that and just focus on what I'm doing. And at the end of the day, if I'm able to create something that I enjoyed creating, that the people I worked with enjoyed creating, and it was really pretty much the vision that I had in mind, then that's good enough for me. And hopefully somebody will enjoy it.
You know what gets me too, as much as people, dissing work, some people overpraise work that
Yeah,
I don't
that's
like, which
right.
again, but that also shows us that we all have such different, perspectives. But for
Sure.
some reason, I just hate it when everyone loves a big Hollywood movie that I watch it and I think there's just nothing original or there's just no singular creative vision in that movie.
Right.
And maybe that's why I like a low budget, maybe a little more rough around the edges movie. But if there's a singular vision behind it, I will
Hmm.
excuse so much more of the technical part.
Right. Yeah. That's always kind of
I
been
mean,
my
I mean,
feeling too.
I mean, you hate it when people, well, see, I hate even to bring this up because people get so, possessive of their favorite movies. But I can think of a couple in particular. They're IMDb's, top 10 of all time, and I look through those, and there's some I like, and I can see why people like them. But it's almost like the minute it becomes a franchise,
Yeah.
I think people's critical skills go out the window
I
because then
think
it
so.
becomes like this religion of loving this.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. I
I
agree.
mean, is there any like one movie that you just hate that people love it?
Oh gosh. There must be, there really must be. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know that there are times where somebody thinks a movie is fantastic and I watch it and I just don't see what they see. And I don't know if people are just saying they think it's a great movie because everyone else said it was. The power of suggestion. I don't know.
Because as an artist, we also have to know what we don't like as much as what we do like. Because if we're
True.
taking a stand, and maybe part of what you don't like is when it's like pretentious,
Yeah.
we have to keep that part of ourselves sharp to think, what you consider pandering,
Mhm.
by a filmmaker. And maybe it's just, those Hollywood committees that want to
Mhm.
check off every box and say, oh, this was popular in this movie,
Yeah.
got to include that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
since you don't have those limitations or someone, looking over your shoulder telling you to do that, how do you use that freedom and how do you resist being pretentious in your filmmaking?
Right. I just I don't I don't have a studio standing over me telling me what I can and can't do. It's really a canvas that I can create what I want on there, and I enjoy that. Um,
Mhm. Well, as an artist, what is the unique thing you're bringing to the table in a world that already has John Waters and killer clowns from outer space and just a lot of fun stuff out there? What do you think is the unique Sentai style?
Always pushing the envelope to make people think outside of their comfort zone.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. As I said earlier, I like to throw in subject matter that's sometimes uncomfortable that most people don't like to talk about. But I like to do it in a comedic, fun way. And
So now
I
that you
don't
have a
like
body of work,
what was that?
now that you have a body of work, which I'm trying to, count, 5 features, almost 10 shorts, you have enough to look at where you can think, what are your common themes or, what are you psychologically trying to resolve in yourself within these movies? I mean, what are the common themes you keep coming back to? I'm getting deep here. This is like
Yeah, yeah,
maybe a little deeper than you thought, but it's kind of fun because you can look at
yeah.
what's common, what's this common thread you have.
I would say religion, sexuality, and gender norms. Those are, you know, and maybe a little bit of politics. All things that you should never mix together. I tend to throw together in my films and explore in one way
Sex,
or another.
religion, politics,
Yeah.
and even within that, what do you think you've resolved any of those themes, and so you don't have to come back to them?
I think so because I notice as I go along from film to film, um, there are less elements of one or the other in each film. And I'm starting to explore other things. So yeah, I definitely do think that they're kind of more resolved.
Because one thing when you're a beginning filmmaker, it's just a thrill to try out something.
Oh
Like I'm
yeah.
sure when you had your friends dress up like werewolf hookers. That was
Hmm.
fun.
Oh yeah.
Let's face it. You kind of you just want to try those things.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
after you've done them, you think, okay, I don't necessarily need to revisit that. But that's
Right.
something you do when you're both young in general and a young filmmaker, a beginning
Yeah.
filmmaker. You're about to hit 40.
Mhm.
Some people, might say, oh, let go of the silly stuff. Now you've got to be serious. Do you think you need to let go of that? Can you be in your 40s and 50s and beyond and still make the fun stuff that might be a little bit silly?
Definitely, because that's just part of who I am and who I've always been. So that'll always be part of my style.
Do you think your silly humor will have an evolution? I mean, as you hit your 40s,
I
what are
think so.
some new themes that are attracting you or new subject matter?
I think the environment is something I'm starting to be more conscious of, the impact we have on the world. Um,
So
yeah,
maybe
that's
like a Swamp Thing knockoff?
maybe. Yeah, like definitely the environment and the sciences are things that are a little more of interest to me, and history. So I think maybe my productions are going to go more science and history direction. Yeah.
So maybe like a Toxic Avenger
I'd
type
love it.
movie, but
Yeah.
place it like in the Civil War era?
Like that would be perfect. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I definitely love the trauma films, of course. Definitely.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was going to mention earlier. That's one of the closest things that reminds me of your work is trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was so pleased to have Werewolf Hookers included in a trauma compilation. That was like a
Was that
child.
what a grindsploitation or schlockorama?
I think it was Grindsploitation 4.
Melt, which was subtitle
Station.
Meltsploitation.
Yeah.
And who knew? Like, I don't know if they do it on all of them, but I know on some of those compilations they put them out on DVD also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, did you get any
They're
of
in the
those
process.
DVDs?
I don't. I think the first three of the Grindsploitation films have been on DVD, and last I heard, that one was in the process at some point.
Hmm.
I haven't heard anything else.
So I know some other people who have been in those compilations, and just to be able to, not just for yourself, but to tell your actors, we're on the Trauma Channel.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Like,
that suddenly becomes real to people, and even though
yeah.
you're an independent, it's still nice to have some brand name recognition.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when that happened, it was just like a dream come true for me. The 10-year-old in me was so thrilled to see that, the trauma title come up and all the films in the compilation. It was great, and we were really excited about that.
Mhm.
Um, in Easter Holocaust, we were so fortunate to have Ari Lehman played Jason in the first Friday the 13th movie, make a cameo. I don't know if you noticed that.
He was on the TV set,
Yeah, yeah,
which was pretty clever. That was a way to film a star for a day,
yeah,
not have to schedule it around other actors,
yeah,
and still be a presence there.
right. Yeah, that wasn't an original scene in the script. That was just kind of thrown together to have him involved. So,
And how did you make that happen?
I actually met him at a concert. He's in a group called First Jason. It's like a little independent music group that he has, and I went to that and I met him, and then I later talked to him on Facebook, and he said that he'd be interested in doing a cameo in our little film. So I was pretty thrilled.
And when he was done, what was his impression of acting for you?
Um, I didn't really get a real direct response from him, so I'm
Because
not
it was
really.
more like one-on-one.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So were you kind of hoping that like you could treat your stable of actors to a celebrity? Like were you hoping that you could have
Yeah.
maybe mixed him with your other actors?
Yeah. I mean, definitely to kind of encourage them a little bit more to say, look, we're kind of growing still, and we've got this actor involved, and yeah, it was exciting. Then we had Charity Raymer. She did a little cameo in there. She played Bella Black on Days of Our Lives, so that was fun.
Just the style of acting for you.
Yeah,
It seems like
exactly.
that would be a dream for you to do a cameo on a soap opera.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it so much to be on Days of Our Lives. I would. I would.
That's another thing is people don't realize, and especially with camp comedy, is there's a whole soap opera style of acting.
Yeah,
And it's so often used as a put down. Oh,
it
this
is.
movie, the acting was so soap opera. But for people who love that, you want to do that. You want to have that kind of theatricality.
Right. I've always enjoyed it, and I think that daytime drama and horror go well hand in hand, and I don't think you see a lot of that. So maybe that is something that I would think my films might be remembered for. Is that kind of a
Are you
vibe?
like a Dark Shadows fan?
Love Dark Shadows. Yes, I recently, well, a few years ago, I bought the whole collection and watched it from start to finish.
The whole
And
thing?
what's that?
The whole thing?
The whole thing from the very first episode in black and white until the last color episode. It came in a giant coffin
Oh my God.
box. Yeah,
That's dedication. That's a lot of hours of watching.
yeah. But it hit every note. The crazy colors, the gothic themes, the over the top acting, everything I love.
The wigs.
The wigs, yeah. And that show, they had so many bloopers in it, so many effects that didn't go right. And for me, it's like that's still hailed as such a cult classic,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, do you think that American Horror Story is the closest we have to something like that now?
I think so. I think
Mhm.
so. I think it's a very modern, definitely darker take on something like that, for
Hmm.
sure. For
Well,
sure.
another thing that American Horror Story has done is it's not only kind of revitalized horror for television, which is, traditionally kind of tricky to pull off as
Hmm.
opposed to a full-length movie.
Right.
When something's episodic and choppy, it's harder to build up that suspense.
Yeah.
But what American Horror Story seemed to do is bring back what we loved, especially from like the 70s. These big, beautiful horror movies with cinematography and
Right.
art direction, kind of like the Italian horror movies of the 70s.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and it seems like for you, Glamboy Productions, you must just love it when glamour and just
Oh,
this high art direction meets horror.
do. I do. I love it. I love it. I recently saw Suspira for the first time. It was on my list of movies to see for years and years, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved
Is that the East Coast pronunciation?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Love it.
AKA Suspiria.
Suspiria. Yeah, I always say. Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it both, but yeah, over this way we say Suspira. But I
Now, the
was
thing
so
about when you first discover that in Italian horror, can you remember when you first discovered those?
yeah. Just I was really taken back by the style of cinematography.
Hmm.
And I love the fact that Joan Bennett was in it from Dark Shadows. That like blew my mind. She was fantastic in that.
See, that's the one thing with the remake,
Hmm.
which I didn't totally hate it. I mean, I liked it for what it was. To
Yeah.
me, it never had a Joan Bennett moment.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Did you see the remake?
I didn't know.
And I think in Suspiria, that nod to, Dark Shadows and Joan Bennett.
Yeah.
Don't you love it when people honor,
Oh, I
who
do.
else, like a Vincent Price or just someone who's dedicated themselves to that genre, then they
Yeah.
give them a cameo in a movie?
Yes. I love that. I love moments like that in films. Definitely. I can't
And I,
say I'm a big fan of remakes though, honestly.
well, you seem like the fan of, the Grand Dames, like the
Yes.
whatever happened to Baby Jane when you put in like a Betty Davis and a Joan
Yeah.
Crawford. Like,
Hmm.
who would be the ultimate actress you would like to put into one of your movies?
Oh my gosh. Ugh, Jessica Lange would be fantastic, of course, but yeah, yeah, right on that. Um, from Days of Our Lives, I've always loved Eileen Davidson. She was fantastic.
Hmm.
I would say probably the two of them off the top of my head.
You know, John Waters almost got Sharon Stone into a movie,
Wow. How
but that
amazing would
didn't
that?
work. I think it was Cecil B. Demented. I think
Oh, I
Melanie
love
Griffith
that. Melanie Griffith. Yeah, that's another one of my favorites for sure. Yeah.
got her. But oh, and then you got Kathleen Turner in Serial Mom. So are there any like modern people like that, like a Sharon Stone, a Kathleen Turner? I mean, who
Nothing
has
really.
the demented star quality that would fit in a Sentai movie?
I mean, I would love to have Lady Gaga, but that's just dreaming.
Maybe you could get Susan Lucci.
Oh, wow. She would be amazing, but she might be busy. They're going to do a reboot, I guess, of All My Children. So, um,
Really?
yeah, I
And
guess it's
is she going to play like, you know, now to adjust her age, she has to actually adjust it and play a 42-year-old Erica Kay. She can no longer be 35 anymore.
yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah,
You know, they
that's
have that soap opera kind of time warp thing.
yeah,
You know, someone's like a baby, and then 3 seasons later, they're
yeah,
16.
yeah, yeah. I love
It's
that
no
kind of
fun to have like a 5-year-old character.
yeah. All of a sudden they're in college.
Yeah, and then to adjust the timeline, you realize
Sure,
Susan
sure.
Lucci would be, like the great grandmother if the timeline was normal, but suddenly they
Right,
have a name
right.
for that when they like
Oh,
adjust.
it's like sourced or sourced. It's something different. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
don't
they
they
could
do
have like
that in comic
daytime
books when they change some fundamental part of the story?
um retcon,
Retcon. They
retcon.
retcon it. How would
Yeah.
you retcon Erica Kane?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I don't even know how old she is now in real life.
I think she must be 70 by now.
God. It's so hard to tell. She always looks the same.
It's because of that thing she advertises that like sands your face.
Oh
With that
yeah.
spinning brush and keeps you
Yeah.
looking fresh
Oh.
and dewy. Well, to wrap up, I think what I admire the most is you've developed a body of work on a very low budget.
Mhm.
And I just want you to share with beginning filmmakers the power of building up a body of work that has common threads and has really let you develop a unique style.
So words of wisdom. Have a specific vision in mind.
Hmm.
Um, don't be overly worried about having the latest and greatest equipment.
Hmm.
Have a strong story. I mean, having a really strong story and dedicated actors is really essential because you can have a film that looks great, but if it's lacking in content, subject matter, then there's really no point to it. And just have as much fun as you can, I would say. And don't be overly focused on, having your film, be worldwide famous. Don't set yourself up for disappointment. Be pleasantly surprised if you have some successes, but really enjoy the ride.
So knowing what you know now, 10 years ago when you made your first film, what do you wish you would have known back then?
I wish I would have known more about lighting. That was something that I really knew nothing about in the very beginning because coming from a theater background, lighting was always done for us. We never really had to think about that part of it. Um, so as far as acting, that was, I mean, translating acting from stage to screen was never really too difficult. So I'd say lighting. That was something I wish I would have known more about going into it because you can really change the overall mood and tone of a scene and a whole film with just your lighting.
I just figured who your actress could be. Since you want, we talked about Swamp Thing. Remember the Swamp Thing sequel with Heather,
Christy,
what's her name?
Heather, Heather Locklear.
Heather Locklear. I think her career needs a boost right now.
Yeah, I would definitely take her. Sure. I
I
loved
think
her in
she
that.
might be at this point. Maybe I think it could be a doable thing.
Yeah, I'm always looking for actors that are looking to make a comeback.
See, and I could picture her like in a lab coat,
Yeah.
glasses. Like she could be the scientist.
Yeah, I always love to have scientists in my films. Women with big hair, or at least big wigs.
Right. They can have as big hair and as trashy as possible, but
Yes,
then you put the glasses on them and you can get away with anything.
exactly. Yep, the glasses are a game changer.
Well, Michael Leo Centi. See how I keep saying your name as a plug?
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And I practice Sentai because it looked like Senti, but Sentai, which to me sounds kind of like a sci-fi samurai, I don't know, alien creature or something.
Oh, I
Sentai.
like that. That's cool.
Revenge of the Sentai.
Yeah, right, right.
But just want to encourage people to check your workouts. So if anyone watching this wants to check this out, where's the best place to learn more about Michael Leo Sentai?
Well, you can always find information on the IMDb page. You
Okay.
can look on YouTube on Glamboy Productions and see the trailers for the films. And I believe for most of the films, I have different links associated with them where you can
Okay.
see the films. Our Facebook page, that's probably the best way to contact directly, would be the Glamboy Productions page on Facebook.
And one last thing, for all your fans listening, uh, what would be the one thing you would want to say personally to them as maybe a big thank you for just existing?
Oh gosh. Just thank you if you ever take the time to sit down and watch one of our crazy over the top productions. Just knowing that somebody is watching it and enjoying it is fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And your next movie, I'm expecting big things and at least one drone shot.
Okay, I will try to incorporate that in there.